Good evening, faithful. Welcome to another episode of the Hammerhead Show. It is Friday. That means I'm your host, Rob Schuh. That's my co-host, Jack Hammer from the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. And we are here to guide you through the matchup in week 3 against the Denver Broncos. 49ers sitting at 1-1. Very tumultuous week as far as 49ers news goes. Jack, have you been able to maintain your sanity throughout this tumultuous week?
Well, that would imply that I was sane to begin with, but
that's fair.
No, I mean it's been a long week. I'm really looking forward to Sunday getting here and having a game. I don't think the insanity is going to stop there. I think it'll continue, but I'm looking forward to Sunday. That's for sure.
I am too. My hope is as we get back to football, it will distract us from a little bit of the insanity, but you're probably right. Depending upon the outcome on Sunday night, it could skew this argument one way or the other. So you got to prepare for a little bit of madness, no matter what the outcome is. Could be in a win, could be in a loss. Want to say hello to all those in the chat. We've got the Oakdale Bubba Niner Show coming in to say, hey, Rob, nice. Quesadilla Thrilla coming in to talk about Jordan P. Mason. When J.P. Mason speaks, people listen. LOL. Raphael 5629ers, what's up, Rob? Jack, Sneakerheads, and everyone. Sean 951 Niners Sneakerhead here on the channel as well. Coming in, bang, bang, Niner gang. Randall Riley in the house. Kevin, Stephen McGinnis, all here. Happy Friday to everybody that is here in the chat and just watching, even if you don't participate in the chat. But no matter what you're doing, if you're watching, hit that like button. And down below in the description of the video is all of the information you need to follow Jack, whether it's on Twitter, subscribing on YouTube, or bookmarking that ever important Santa Rosa Press Democrat blog over there. Make sure that you are reading in on that one with Jack's great articles. Kim Adams coming in with the score prediction, 27-10. We're going to get to that score prediction a little bit later, and I'm fairly close to what Kim is throwing out there. But Jack, let's start with a quick injury update. I'm going to go through, ask you a couple questions about your thoughts on some of these. The Broncos, you had DJ Jones dealing with an ankle injury who didn't practice on Wednesday, but it's looking like DJ's going to be out there. Cornerback Patrick Surtain with a shoulder, wasn't practicing Wednesday, limited Thursday. Jerry Jeudy was out Wednesday 30. Randy Gregory, Darius Phillips, all not practicing earlier in the week. For the 49ers, Kittle is set to return, not even on the injury report. The official list is questionable: Eric Armstead, Colton McKivitz, and out Daniel Brunskill, Tyler Kroft, and Ty Davis Price. Jack, with Eric Armstead out with the foot injury, not practicing, do you have any legitimate expectation that listed as questionable, he makes it out onto the field for the 49ers Sunday night?
You know, I think it's definitely questionable that he's going to be out there because the 49ers don't have a long history of putting guys on the field that haven't practiced all week. We saw it. I don't believe that Trent Williams practiced at all last year leading up to the NFC Championship game. We saw how that went for the 49ers. So I would be surprised really to see him on the field, to see Eric Armstead that is on the field on Sunday night. The 49ers have so much depth at that spot. I think that might be the direction that we see them lean this week.
Any concern with Armstead out that will negatively impact the 49ers run defense?
I think there could be a little bit of a downturn there. I think his play in the middle is a little understated in terms of how good he is against the run and how much his athleticism helps in there. So that could be an area definitely to watch this week, especially what the Broncos do on offense.
I am looking forward to seeing that. That's one of the matchups we'll be talking about later. One of the topics we will hit again. Kurt, Sneakerhead here on the channel, comes in. Rob, according to Ben Albright, Jeudy out, Surtain probable. We will talk a little bit about Surtain, that shoulder injury later on. And Jerry Jeudy, I assumed he wasn't going to be playing, but did see that he was listed as questionable. I feel like that's an added advantage for the 49ers. But another advantage would be the return of George Kittle. That happens. Seems to be cleared to play with no restrictions. Jack, are you hoping or expecting a big game out of George Kittle, his first of the 2022 season?
That's going to be one of the things to watch, right? Is how does George Kittle perform? How does the offense change with Kittle on the field? I think pretty much everybody that watches the 49ers feels like Kittle helps them out in the run game. 49ers are going to need that now without Trey Lance in there to kind of move defenders around. They're going to need to have Kittle and his blocking ability in there to kind of be the one that masks that loss a little bit. So I think that the return of George Kittle, if he is sharp in the run game, is really going to help this offense out.
The run game, his blocking could absolutely add to those yards per carry. I think he's going to have a big statistical game as well. I feel like George Kittle is ready to break out, reuniting him with Jimmy Garoppolo, obviously a good pairing there in producing yards after the catch and being able to hit George Kittle consistently over the middle of the field. I'm optimistic that Kittle could have a breakout game here and really be the star, at least statistically speaking.
He could. It's going to be interesting to see how this offense performs. And I think that, with Kittle there and the weapons you have around him, Jimmy Garoppolo taking over at quarterback, all those things could really help with Kittle putting up big numbers here in his first game back for the 2022 season.
I'm very excited about it. I'm with Kurt Papatakis here saying Kittle needs to make up for the last 2 weeks fantasy-wise. I've got a couple of teams where I didn't have a backup tight end because I didn't think I'd need one until the break, right? Until mid-season when we have our bye. No, sure enough, week 1, week 2, had to scour the waiver wire for trash, and it didn't work out so well. So, yeah, Kittle, feel like it is needed this time around. That's what I'm hoping for. Casey Dilla Thrilla comes in with a question. Rob, as big as Kinlaw is, are y'all amazed that he didn't have more batted passes? I've not really given that one a whole lot of thought, but he is a large human being. You do see that, at least in the past. You saw that with Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner being in the center, tall guys able to get their hands up. I haven't seen that from Kinlaw, but I'll admit that I haven't been looking for it either. Is that something that you have noticed or would have expected to be a little bit higher, Jack?
No, I don't. I think he's an interesting one because I think that he definitely. There are times when he doesn't finish off the pass rushes and he kind of sits in the lanes and looks to do that kind of thing. But at this point, we're early in the season, so he's been playing really well. Kinlaw is one of the guys that's been very impressive to me over the first couple of weeks. So I think he's been okay overall. I'm not too worried about some of those maybe missed bat downs, those type of things.
Absolutely. Kevin coming in, Rob and Jack. Yeah, Kittle is one to watch, blocking for his man crush, Jimmy G. Want more than just the middle Kittle, Jimmy, gimme. Yeah, we need to hit a deep one to Kittle as well. I'm predicting a big game for Kittle. I'll get to that when I get to the game prediction. So we'll have to call that out. I'm just feeling like I can see the future right now. I've got my crystal ball, and it's telling me that Kittle is going to break out on this one. All right, let's look at a historic matchup. The 49ers coming up against Russell Wilson. Obviously, we have a considerable laundry list of games against Russell Wilson, many without a happy ending to them. Wilson in the regular season is 16-4 against the Niners. Lifetime, sadly, 17-4 when you add in that one critical game that I'd rather forget. And his stats are pretty impressive, but not over the top. 64.7 completion percentage, 208.5 yards per game in the air, 36 touchdowns and 10 picks. So he's been very efficient against the 49ers. A lot of those games have been closer, low-scoring contests. If you add in his rushing yards, clearly that's going to add to his statistics there. But what's your feeling about how Russell Wilson is playing so far this year and whether the 49ers will again struggle in going up against their old nemesis?
It's been a little bit up and down, but I think you go back and you look at his performance against Seattle. He played pretty well against Seattle for the most part. I thought he moved the ball up and down the field. He threw for over 300 yards, well over that against a Seattle defense, and played pretty well. Then last week against Houston was definitely a rougher go of it for him. Getting booed in the first half there at Mile High Stadium, I guess is what it's still called there. I think it's to be expected a little bit because it is a new team and he's getting in the rhythm with those guys. But at the same time, he's making plays that helped them win the game last week. And in some ways, they probably should have beat Seattle in week 1. There was a turnover that wasn't his fault in that game. And, I'm never going to look at Russell Wilson right now at this point. He hasn't given me any reason, at least when he's played the 49ers, to believe that he's going to be a reason for Denver to lose this game on Sunday night.
No, I don't think so either. I agree. Against Seattle, if it weren't for those two fumbles at the goal line, you would expect that Denver would have walked away with that one. And I've thought that Russell Wilson has looked decent so far, clearly still getting used to operating within the new offense. I'm not so sure that I have seen the lost step, but everyone else seems to. Randall, Riley, sneakerhead here on the channel, Wilson playing slow of late. And you hear that continually. Has that been your observation, Jack? Do you think that Father Time is catching up with Russell Wilson with regard to his legs?
Yeah, I think the thing with Wilson is that people are keeping him in the pocket, and he's not able to run around and make those kind of throws. And Wilson's not a very good player when he's just dropping back and throwing. His danger always came from his legs, and if he's not moving around as much, he's not quite the same guy. But he throws one of the best deep balls in the game. That's
he
for
does.
Sure.
He does. And he may not have Jerry Jeudy out there, but he does still have Sutton, and Sutton is a great deep ball threat. So it's absolutely something that the Niners have to be cautious of. When you look at this matchup, what does your gut tell you about whether or not Russell Wilson is going to have success about the 49ers, and will the 49ers be able to contain Russ?
Well, there's one of the big questions is, can they contain him? It's because, he can move around, and he does that in the 49ers. Look what just happened on week one. The 49ers played a mobile quarterback that was able to make plays with his legs, and they were broke down in the second half. So there's still some questions and concerns around that. And, you can say that Wilson slowed down, but let's see what happens on Sunday. The 49ers are going to have to show that they can keep this guy in the pocket and not let him make plays with his legs.
Yes, in those historic matchups, there are many an instance wherein you feel like you've got Wilson, but one of the edges collapses just a little too far, and there goes Wilson scampering around the edge, and he's off for a gain of 25. Seemingly every time we come up against him, there is a bit of over pursuit, and that's certainly one of the areas of the 49ers defense that can get turned against them is their aggression in getting after a quarterback. When they come up against the faster mobile quarterbacks, that same aggression can shoot them in the foot because they do over pursue and they don't contain those quarterbacks. They get a couple of those schoolyard plays, happened in week one against Chicago. Looks like I want to bring in Kevin because this is in reference to something I used on my own thumbnail here, Jack. So I got to bring it in. He says, Rob Schuh, rumor has it Kinlaw's been watching Castaway each night to chase after Wilson so he doesn't get away. I feel the tide is on our side on this one. Yes, the thumbnail I threw up there was Kyle Shanahan on Tom Hanks' body with Russell Wilson's head, where Wilson, the volleyball, should be yelling Wilson. Yeah, that's how I'm feeling. Wilson is who I am most concerned about in this one. But when we talk matchups, we will get into the rest of the team as well. It is not just the 49ers versus Wilson. It is the 49ers versus the Denver Broncos. And the Denver Broncos, with their rushing attack, has been pretty phenomenal. I mean, they are both backs averaging 5 yards per carry, Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon. But the 49ers defense has been incredibly stout so far. Niners allowing 2.6 yards per carry. Between those two, something does have to give. You can't have both on Sunday night. What does your gut tell you about whether the 49ers are going to be able to slow down Denver's rushing attack Sunday?
This is a game, I hear a lot of people talking about it going to be a blowout or they're not worried about this game. I don't know. I think this is so far we've only seen 2 weeks, and through 2 weeks you have two teams playing on Sunday night that have been very similar to one another. And so I think this is a little bit of a litmus test for the 49ers in that, week one, week two, those are kind of, extensions of the preseason. Week one's always kind of wonky because it's the first week, and then week two is kind of that way as well. Now you're getting into where the season really begins. And we're going to really find out a lot about, I think, both of these teams this week. Because, you can say the 49ers have only played X, Y, and Z teams, and Broncos have only played X, Y, and Z teams. But, we don't – neither one of those really matter because both teams have played similar opponents in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, it does feel like a step up in opponent, quality of opponent for the San Francisco 49ers. Would seem to be an impact that Eric Armstead is out this week. And the weather has played a fact in the 49ers having that 2.6 yards per carry and the way in which the games went. I actually thought against Seattle, they were moving the ball reasonably well to begin with the rushing attack, but had to get away from it because they fell behind in that one. I think it could have been a different story if they were able to stick with it throughout. it's still my concern about this defense is their rush defense. I'm very pleased with what I've seen from Hassan Ridgeway so far. You also have Kevin Givens has been very stout, and Javon Kinlaw, obviously starting, has looked very good. But we've also played against what seems to be subpar competition on the offensive side of the ball in the first 2 weeks. Denver, with their rushing attack and Russell Wilson back there, feels like a stout test. This is one of those, Denver has felt like they've underperformed for 2 weeks. I don't anticipate Russell Wilson underperforming for an entire season. So my guess is that he puts it together at some point, and the fear is that he feels so confident against San Francisco, he starts to put it together this week.
Yeah, and that's I remember thinking that last year with Seattle going into week 4, and the Seahawks. I know we're talking about the Broncos, but if you remember at the beginning of last season, the Seattle started off weak, and Russell Wilson wasn't playing all that great, and then they got into San Francisco and they won the game, and I'm concerned. That's the concern here is, again, this is a rushing attack that has 2 guys that they bring at you. Both those 2 have carried the ball 22 times. They're both, running the ball really well. I think it's just going to be a really tough matchup for the 49ers. And when you look at this one, from the running back perspective, another thing to think about there with Javonte Williams is his ability to catch the ball. He actually has the most receptions of any Bronco this season with 12. And the 49ers have shown themselves to be a little susceptible at times to the screen game. And so that's going to be something that we're going to see them have to put up and really work with this week.
Absolutely. The 49ers are going to have to be stout on defense. There are some predicting that they will have a phenomenal defensive game. And this is a great defense. I'd love to see it. Randall Riley predicting this defense is going to maybe give up 10 points. That's about it. I would be ecstatic with a defensive performance like that. Again, I'm a little bit nervous coming up against Russell Wilson, him getting it back together, putting it together for the first time, perhaps, for the season. The Broncos certainly have moved the ball on offense. They have got that 5 yards per clip rushing the ball, but they have not put the ball into the end zone. They have red zone woes to this point. A lot of that has to do with those 2 goal line fumbles. Not a good way to improve your red zone stats, but they're 0-6 in the red zone this year with those 2 fumbles. When you look at the 49ers and their red zone defense against an offense that is struggling in the red zone, do you think the 49ers have the advantage here in attempting to keep Denver out of the end zone?
This is an interesting one because I know I saw this stat earlier in the week, and you're bringing it up here as well. And they might be a little weak in the red zone. I'm not sure. But when I look at the numbers overall, the Broncos have scored only 5 points less than the 49ers this season. So they're still scoring points at a higher, at a pretty decent rate. Russell Wilson has that ability to make plays down the field, and so they might not necessarily need to make the plays in the red zone, but since that's what you asked me, I think the 49ers probably have the advantage in that area just because of their defense and what they can do down there, especially when you tighten it up and make those spaces to throw the ball smaller.
Yeah, absolutely. With Jerry Jeudy not out there, I mean, Russell Wilson doesn't feel like he's cooking yet. Again, the fear is that he starts to come on strong in this one. Denver is making mistakes. San Francisco's defense feels like they are playing at an elite clip, but I have a hard time imagining that we really will stifle the Broncos. My guess is that they do burst into the end zone on this one from the red zone. I'm going to guess that they get the run game going at least a little bit. I tend to side with you, Jack, that I'm not so sure this ends up being a blowout. I think it feels closer, and because it's Russell Wilson back there, even if it's 2 scores, even if the Niners are up by 10, it's going to feel pretty close because that fourth quarter magic can turn things around pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that's the problem is if they're not able to get away and it's a close one going into the fourth quarter, that's when Russell Wilson makes you worry.
When you look at this particular question coming in from Stephen McGinnis, he says, Rob, you feel our defense might bring some blitz packages from safety, defensive back, linebackers. As we get into week 3, what type of frequency do you expect from DeMeco Ryans week in, week out as far as blitzes go?
I think the less you can blitz, the better it is. You don't necessarily, if you can get home with your front 4, it's better not to blitz because that makes it tougher for the quarterback. If you can put pressure with 4, allows you to play different defenses behind it, maybe a little bit more zone, those kind of things. You kind of constrict those the field a bit on them. So in a lot of ways, I know people want to see blitzes, blitz, but blitzing makes the game easier for opposing quarterbacks if you don't get home.
And a savvy quarterback like Russell Wilson is more apt to make you pay for a blitz that doesn't get home. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is. That's fair to say. And I know we've seen Robert Saleh use some of those in the past, but he was here. But I just don't. I wouldn't be sending a lot of blitzes at Russell Wilson's way, especially if early on we're saying that the front can get home without it. You just play your regular defense and go from that.
Do you anticipate any type of a quarterback spy on defense against Russell Wilson, or is he not running enough to really focus on him in that way?
No, I think you have to have somebody kind of keep an eye on him because his mobility is an issue. So I think you probably have one of those linebackers as your spy to help keep him in the pocket as much as possible.
Looking at the other side of the ball, Quesadilla Thrilla 71, Sneakerhead here on the channel says, Jack, Rob, is Kyle predictable on early downs? This is a question that I've seen come up from 49er faithful, believing that Kyle, at least in this season, has been a little bit predictable. I think with Trey Lance in there, maybe the numbers skewed so heavy towards the run that it appeared a little bit more that way. But is your sense that Kyle Shanahan is at all predictable in his play calling to this point this season?
No, I don't think there's any. I'm not sitting there watching him guessing what the play is based off of what I'm seeing. So at this point, I would say I don't think that he's predictable. I think the offense has moved the ball really well for the most part. With again, you go back to the first half in Chicago and through the first half and beginning of the second half, and that offense moved up and down the field. They just couldn't put the points on the board because of various things. And you saw the same thing against Seattle. They went out and they had two 70-yard drives to start off with, a 60-plus yard drive for a touchdown in the third one. In the second half, they had two 60-plus yard drives that should have resulted in 10 points, but one of them was a blocked field goal. So this is an offense that's moved up and down the field. So this whole thing with Kyle Shanahan is really weird to me. I'm really trying to figure out why people are so down on Kyle Shanahan right now.
Right.
Considering what this offense has looked like through 2 weeks. They've moved the ball. They just, unfortunately, Kyle Shanahan can't throw the touchdown pass to the open receiver that he called up, and he can't be the one that holds on to the ball when he calls a running play. If
he could, he would. Right? If they'd allow him to do it, he would.
Yes, he would. Try, right?
Right. Uh-huh. He's like, I could do this better than you guys. Damn it, I'm putting myself in. That's it. Put myself in.
There you go.
That's fantastic. Absolutely. Now, got to bring in a couple of comments just because, they go a route that feels right. The greatest 49 says, Rob, another fire show. I agree. Jack and I together, always fantastic. And Craftwork Concrete, taking it in an interesting direction. Says, Rob, who gets better chicks, you or Jimmy G? I will say this. I've not dated a porn star. And so depending on your opinion on dating porn stars, Jimmy may have a leg up there. Jimmy's got me beat in the looks department. I'm not down on myself there in the least, but Jimmy's like 99th percentile when it comes to look. That jawline, the hair, dude's doing all right. He's
only
doing
one
all
leg?
right.
Only one leg up?
That's it. That's it. It's close. It's real close, Jack. Real close. Randall Riley says, be predictable. Smash that like button. Just like Kyle Shanahan, super predictable in this one. Harold coming in to say hello to me. Hello to Jack. Appreciate that. Michael Salazar says, Rob, why do fans and even some 49ers YouTubers, podcasters have so little faith in the run game considering the success? I don't know. This goes back to where fans seem to be with Kyle Shanahan, with the offense. There does seem to be the familiarity breeding contempt when it comes to several players on the 49ers, when it comes to several coaches, when it comes to the front office. There is a hypercritical section of the fan base that really want to attribute blame. And this year, if you don't pay attention to the nuance of the offense, it's easy to think that it's not producing because of those ill-timed mistakes that have popped up and shot the offense in the foot. But to your point, Jack, I don't think that those have been the fault of Kyle Shanahan, and I don't think that they were attributable to the run game either. They were just sort of those mistakes that came up that you've got to curtail going forward because they have been moving the ball.
Yeah, I don't know who else is talking about little faith in the run game, so I can't really address that. But what I would say was, if you feel like the 49ers are going to have some difficulty in the run game, it's because they don't have Trey Lance there to help you open it up. There's plays you can go back to like the Chicago game. There's plays where Trey Lance's ability just to run the ball is affecting the defense, where he turns like on his own read, and you can see the linebacker staying outside because you don't know if he's going to keep it or not. And then when he gives it, that linebacker, because he's outside a little bit more, it makes it easier for the running back to get up the field on him. And so that's one issue. The other thing that I would say on the flip side of that, though, is, you watched that game against Seattle last week, and the 49ers you saw Seattle really coming hard off the edge. Every time the 49ers try to boot out, they're just flying off the backside. They're not even worried about it. And so you see the 49ers create some running space with Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel's not getting the ball, but you see Deebo Samuel going across the formation, and you see the eyes, and you see everybody moving with them, and then they come back the other way and hit holes that way. So there's a lot of tricks in his bag that he's going to be able to go to, and just because it's Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't think really changes it. The 49ers ran the ball pretty well last year.
Yes, they did.
Not as good as we've seen them in the past, but they were still pretty good.
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan does seem to have a lot of ways to get the defense looking one way and then take it another. Lot of tricks up his sleeve, no doubt about it. This is an interesting one from J. Cruz 24. Says, Rob, so what's the narrative if we lose this game? Is it, let's see what happens next week, or is it Jimmy still can't get it done? Obviously, it depends on how the game plays out, but if we lose. Jack, I think that this brings up an interesting topic of what is the narrative regardless of whether we win or lose, and what are those potential storylines that come out and become louder and louder because of one of those results? I think, to me, if you look at a loss this week, in particular, if Jimmy makes any mistakes, there will be a subsect of 49er faithful that will say, see, I told you so. We can't win with Jimmy. Jimmy's not good enough. I don't know why we kept him on this team. Now Trey, can't get back out there. If he is healthy, Shanahan's going to stick with him. There's going to be all this kerfluffle next offseason. To me, the madness will come back up if we lose another game. But I have to say, if I play out the opposite end and we win a game, if it's not Jimmy throwing a touchdown pass to win it, there'll be a whole same group of people that say, well, Jimmy didn't play a big role in that one. It was the defense. It was the run game. It seems like the narratives have almost been created and will continue to exist despite the outcome.
Oh yeah, this narrative thing is this is easy, right? If the 49ers lose this game the same way they lose against Chicago, let's just throw that out, right? If this game plays out the same way the Chicago game does, and the 49ers lose 19-10, and then all those things, same thing happened, they're not going to be blaming the defense for the breakdowns in the second half. They're going to be blaming the quarterback. You know why? Because these guys are invested in Trey Lance succeeding. We're invested in Trey Lance succeeding. I can tell you this. I can tell you that my YouTube channel got a lot more hits when I was talking about Trey Lance than it gets when I'm talking about Jimmy Garoppolo. So there's a lot of investment around these guys. And I think that's a part of that plays into it. And I think, look, there's people who are already upset by the fact that they just have to watch Jimmy Garoppolo play. So if this isn't the same people that I'm talking about in that first statement are the same people who throughout last season, when the 49ers were winning games in the second half of the season, were saying they should have won. Jimmy Garoppolo had a nice drive at the end of the game, but it should have been done. It shouldn't have had to go. It's just the way that it is. The narratives are going to run. 49ers lose, it's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo's fault. 49ers win, it's going to be the defense and the running game. Unless Jimmy Garoppolo throws a 70-yard touchdown pass to win it.
Right. Unless it is very clearly a Jimmy play that wins it, then he won't get the credit or will get the blame. I like what Harold's saying. Win or lose, it's all Jimmy's fault. And not to say that there isn't another subsect of 49ers fans that were not rooting against, but seemingly rooting against Trey and rooting for Jimmy irrationally. Like there are extremes on both sides that I want to call out. For sure, it's not just on one side of the equation, which is
there are
wild.
There are, and I'm sorry because this is your show, so I shouldn't say, but it's those aren't the content creators. Let's just put it that way.
Right. No, and no apologies necessary. I feel like it's good to call out those extremes as extremes. Sean 9519er Sneakerhead here on the channel coming in with the super chat. Rob, keep in mind for the first time in 4 years, Jimmy Garoppolo is playing to earn money. He has a lot of incentives in the contract to throw it around and audition for 2023. He is auditioning for his next contract. He's auditioning for any team he might want to play for. It's going to be up to Jimmy whether he does want to come back to San Francisco if there is an offer extended to him at the end of the year. The 49ers made the agreement not to tag Jimmy Garoppolo in that restructuring of his contract. So it's purely up to Jimmy where he wants to play. And I think that this does bode well for Jimmy Garoppolo. He can play a little bit freer because this could be his last season with Kyle Shanahan. So who cares what the coach thinks at this point, right? There could be a little bit of back and forth. He can stand his own ground in that regard. And he is auditioning, so he's going to be trying to push the ball down the field, which is something that when he hasn't done, has allowed opposing defenses to stack the box. So I would hope that what we saw against Seattle continues, that Jimmy does continue to try and throw that deep ball with a little bit more regularity because he seems to be spinning it well right now.
I we'll see what happens. This has been one of the interesting pieces of this week was, I tweeted out yesterday prior to the press conferences that, about what Jimmy Garoppolo said after the game about how in 2017 they were just swinging the ball around the field and those kinds of things. And, it kind of felt a little bit like that. And the question was asked to him, and he said, yeah, you got to kind of, I was just out there playing and I hadn't learned the system yet. I hadn't learned what Kyle wanted yet and those kind of things. And you kind of have to ask Kyle if we're going to keep doing that moving forward. And Kyle Shanahan today was asked a question, and I thought his answer was really interesting because, the part, I don't know. He answered the question in a way which I don't think he realizes makes him look bad. He said that, part of the reason they were throwing down the field was because that was a game plan that was built for another quarterback. So this stuff is there. How about you just build a game plan that works, right? and takes advantage of these things, especially if you're a quarterback that wants to push the ball down the field, is willing to push the ball down the field, who doesn't feel like you're going to, and maybe we're going to see that now because are the 49ers going to bench Jimmy Garoppolo for Brock Purdy? I doubt it.
That seems like an unlikely scenario. That is fascinating, though, that Kyle Shanahan basically conceded that, when I build a game plan for Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't put in as many. That game plan was built for Trey Lance, and Jimmy benefited from some of the throws that Lance was going to be asked to make. Well, it kind of looked like Jimmy was making those throws, so maybe we work those in for Jimmy as well so they can't stack the box. I got to bring in.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to bring in a comment next, but that can wait, please.
All I was going to say was, hey, we saw him take 2 deep shots back to back. One of them should have been caught. It was going to be a tough catch by Ayuk because of the way he had to twist around. Should have been a completion. The second one was a bad throw. So he's 50-50. Let's keep it up.
Let's keep that up. I'll take 50-50. And hitting his receiver in the hands on that one. Tommy Gregory comes in with a far too reasonable comment. You got to read it. You got to read the reasonable ones. It's too early to throw shade towards Jimmy G. It's his second game and third game. We need the win, but fans need to just relax. It's so early in the season. Enjoy what we can still do this year. Jimmy is just getting back into the offense, but we have seen enough of Jimmy G to this point that I think we know what to expect. This new wrinkle of will Kyle Shanahan push the ball down the field seems like something to watch for. But I think it's fair to say we have a good idea of what Jimmy G can do. I want to ask you this, because there was a quote today that was all over the place of Jimmy G, throwing it just as good as anybody out there, right? Some comment from Kyle Shanahan saying he throws it just as well, spins it just as well as anybody out there. Is that your sense? When you think of Jimmy Garoppolo purely as a passer, not his mobility or anything else, do you think of him as a top-tier quarterback when it comes to throwing the ball?
He is one of the better throwers of the football in the 20-yard and in range, especially between the numbers. Get outside the numbers and it gets a little bit iffy, but there are throws that he makes that are elite throws. Not saying he's elite, but there's throws that he can make that he can put into tight spaces, which are elite level throws. I'm saying that. I know that there's a lot of people around the NFL that are saying that as well, and people that watch the game and scout the game, they get paid to do this as their job solely, working at NFL Films and NFL Network and ESPN. That would tell you the same thing. he's not a good deep thrower necessarily. We haven't seen him really be very good with the deep throws. He doesn't get a lot of options, but I don't know. There was one in the Super Bowl that he ripped right in there, and they got a bad PI call on it. But that would have probably changed the whole game. I mean, I think Garoppolo is a much better thrower of the football than people give him credit for. Let's put it that way.
He definitely does not get that credit. So if he is good at it, he is not getting the appropriate level of credit. And I would agree. That is my observation, that it's not quite at the level that people criticize him for, that it is better, that this is people are being overly critical of Garoppolo. Again, going back to they're just so familiar with him. They're just so frustrated with the occasional mistakes that he does make that are head scratching that it clouds the rest of the judgment as well. Let's see.
I think the mistakes are interesting too, because he gets called out for the throws over the middle. That came up today on Twitter, and I responded back is how much of that is actually because of the Kyle Shanahan offense? Because we've seen the throws over the middle. The Flyers have quarterbacks; all of them have a hard time with balls over the middle. We know that Garoppolo throws a bunch. Trey Lance threw a bunch of interceptions over the middle in training camp. Threw an interception over the middle in the first week of the season. All on things that are very similar in terms of having a safety come down and play in the robber and those types of things. So I don't know if it's so much a Jimmy Garoppolo thing as much as it is a 49ers quarterback thing with under Kyle Shanahan and what he's trying to do with all those in-breaking routes.
Yeah, would you see that as there's such a level of intricacy that it could be mildly confusing to a quarterback when it's happening at real speed?
I think that what it is that when the game gets on the line and that's time to get it done, Kyle Shanahan goes back to what he's comfortable with. And where are those balls going? Mostly over the middle. We saw that in Chicago as an example.
Close windows there in the middle of the field in the NFL. Speaking of observation at practice, Gold-Blooded coming in. Jack, you're at the practices. Did you see any deep routes for Danny Gray or other receivers? I think what Gold-Blooded is hinting at here is specifically since Jimmy Garoppolo has taken over. Have you seen any deep routes at practice?
Well, we don't see them really run those routes during the portions of practice while we're there because we only get to see warm-ups, basically. So what we get to see during the season, now that the season's in place, we get to see the first 4 sessions, which is stretching, and then the special teams is the second session, and that's when the quarterbacks, and when you see the videos that I put out there of the quarterbacks warming up by themselves and throwing to the equipment managers, that's during special teams period, and then they go to the third section, which is the quarterbacks are working with the running backs and the receivers are working by themselves and the tight ends are working with the offensive line. Then they go into session 4, and that fourth period is when the quarterbacks and the receivers come together and they're doing the routes, quarterbacks and tight ends. So at that point, we're asked to leave because then they get into team. So don't see the deep routes there. I will say that the one kind of little bit of a hint that we get to see is when we're watching the quarterbacks warm up, because they do, after throwing the ball back and forth with the coaches and that kind of stuff, you see them start to throw against air to those equipment managers. When they're doing that, they're simulating their game plan. So you can get a little bit of an idea of what they're going to try to do and where they're going to try to attack. And I can say that there were a couple of deeper routes that they were trying to work on Wednesday when I was there.
I'd say chuck it deep. You can't overthrow Danny Gray. That kind of speed, the man's just going to catch up with it. Speaking of things that you've seen them practice that I want to know if they'll do with Jimmy Garoppolo, is there any chance we see the triple option make a reappearance now that Trey Lance is out for the season, or does that get shelved?
Oh, that'd be fantastic. That would be, I mean, talk about a defense getting surprised, right? That was actually brought up yesterday by Chris Furster, the offensive line coach, who's kind of their de facto, run game coordinator now that Mike McDaniel's out in Miami.
Right.
He talked about how the touchdown that Garoppolo had in Chicago last year, the second one was on a zone read, for example. So, I mean, it's in there. Heck, he ran the zone read down in the red zone against Seattle on Sunday. So I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that they do something like that.
I'm looking forward to seeing that from Jimmy Garoppolo. Harold Murillo coming in with the super chat, one game at a time. Let's go, Jimmy G. Let's go, Niners. Solid words of encouragement for the San Francisco 49ers. Speaking of that deep pass, Papa Phil coming in, Rob and Jack, Danny Gray didn't look too happy from that pass from Jimmy. Has there been conversations since last game with Danny Gray wherein there was some clarity provided about that dynamic between a speed receiver like Danny Gray and the new quarterback coming back in Jimmy Garoppolo? Has he made it clear how he feels about that relationship?
Yeah, we talked to him on Wednesday in the locker room about that, about the speed element. Does he like taking, is it just a speed guy? He clarified. He said, I'm not just a speed guy. I'll take the ball on a slant and take it 80 yards on you if you want me to, and those types of things. So I think that when if you're a wide open receiver like he was on the one route when it kind of broke down and Garoppolo moved out to his right, you want to get hit on that. So I would understand if I'm the receiver and I'm doing that, I would be a little upset too. I mean, I get upset when I'm playing catch with my son and he throws the ball over my head. So I can't imagine if I'm out on the pro football field and you're wide open, the quarterback misses you like that, you're going to be unhappy. The deep route, the deep route that he missed, that's a Garoppolo problem, is that he misses those corner routes by leaving them inside way too much. He's got to throw that ball further outside and let him run away from the defender.
Absolutely. Danny Gray was not happy about it. Papa Phil says Danny Gray looking at Jimmy like he said something about his mama after he threw that horrible pass to him. Sean 951 Niners comes in with the super chat. Bold prediction: Jimmy G 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Danny Gray 2 touchdowns. I believe I have Jimmy. Yes, I do. I have Jimmy with 3 touchdowns as well, Sean. So that's going to be my bold prediction. I didn't make a yardage prediction. It's not 2 to Danny Gray. I'll get to mine in a little bit. Jack, how do you feel about this bold prediction? You think there's a chance Jimmy tosses 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in this one?
It's going to be. I would not think that he's going to throw for 300 yards. I mean, if Jimmy Garoppolo throws for 300 yards against the Broncos on Sunday, that's basically going to be matching what the Broncos are going up the first 2 weeks.
Man, that would be bold. I'm not seeing the 300 yards. I do have the 3 touchdowns in there, but I believe it will be a run-heavy plan. Speaking of run-heavy, Daniel Jr. Middleton coming in with this super chat. Rob, do you think we will see Marlon Mack before Jordan Mason? I hope not. My hope is that Jordan Mason gets the touches. I would think familiarity with the offense would be a boon in getting into the game first as far as touches, but Marlon Mack is the veteran, maybe a little bit more adept in pass protection if he has the scheme down, if he knows the playbook, if he knows his pass protection assignments. You could see the veteran getting in there. Shanahan has in the past favored veterans. But I like what Forster said about maybe getting to see Mason underneath the lights. Jack, what is your sense? Do we finally get to see what Jordan Mason can do against starters in the NFL?
I hope we do, because he looked really good in the preseason, and you kept this kid around for some reason. Right. If you're not gonna play him, what's he doing on your team? So I would hope that he gets the reps before Marlon Mack, just because he looked really impressive in the preseason, and I want to see if that carries over. I mean, these guys are smarter than us, but still, I want to see it.
Yes, as do I. I want to see that happen, especially because I've picked him up on so many fantasy football teams, and I would like that to turn into something. Harold Murillo says, bold prediction, 49ers score a touchdown in every quarter. I like it. 28 points. That's a good prediction. G-Bone Patron. It's not 49er stuff. It's the left shoe show. I'm with it. I'm with it, G-Bone Patron. Bring it in. All right. Let's transition a little bit to our next topic. Let's talk about the turnover battle. The 49ers have gone the way in which the turnover battle has gone so far this season. San Francisco lost the turnover battle in Chi-Town 2-1, lost that game. Next week against Seattle, Niners win the turnover battle 3-0, clear victory against Seattle. Do you see this as a situation where the 49ers can continue to force turnovers against Denver? Let me add the historic note that Russell Wilson has only thrown a half a pick per game on average against San Francisco. So a pick every other game. You're hoping that this is the other game where he does throw that pick. Can SF force those turnovers?
They're going to, I think, it's been kind of one of their MOs, right? Is that they can turn over the other team and not turn over themselves. They usually win those games, and it becomes, a lot closer if they don't. And, Russell Wilson at times makes some mistakes, and the Friars need him, I think, to make one if they're going to win this game on Sunday night. I'm not of the mindset like some of the folks are, like Sean 951, who talks about the Friars. Denver's only played Seattle and Houston, because I look at the 49ers and I see the 49ers playing the same team as Denver did. And I also see them playing against a Chicago team that just got wiped out against Green Bay on Sunday night last week.
Is your sense of the turnovers to this point, has it been superior defensive back play, secondary play, or has the pressure from the defensive line forced opposing offenses into errant throws wherein we get those turnovers? Or do you see it as some type of a happy marriage? Which level of the defense has performed most admirably to you as far as forcing those turnovers in the first couple of games?
Well, they've had what, 2 interceptions? They had 1 interception of Justin Fields. Is that right?
Yes, okay. That is correct.
So 1 interception of Fields and then 2 last week against Seattle. You look at those 2 interceptions, and the interceptions of Field was a really nice play by who's that guy, number 29?
Talanoa Hufanga. Yeah, I know you're kidding with that one, Jack.
He does a really good job. And then the next one was a pass over the middle, and this 29 guy makes a play again, and the ball bounces up, and another guy picks it off instead. And and the third one was a trick play that just went awry when you have your rookie running back playing his first game throwing the ball. That's always kind of fun. No, but I think the first 2 that we talked about were definitely the result of, it's a mix of both, but boy, those are really good coverage plays by the 49ers.
They are. I agree. I think it's complementary football because there's no doubt that the secondary is playing out of their minds. Talanoa Hufanga, fantastic. Emmanuel Mosley, great. Mooney Ward, great. I mean, E-Man should have gotten that tip where he was called on the PI, which seemed ticky-tack, where Warner came down with a pick on that one. That should have been another turnover. But the pass rush has been, although not turning into sacks just yet, the 49ers are not top 3 in sacks. Almost every other defensive statistical category, they are up there. But pressures have been good for the 49ers. And you could see where pressures not getting into sacks can, though, generate some of those errant throws, forcing quarterbacks into tough situations, making tighter throws into smaller windows. So I see this very much as a complementary setup for the 49ers. Again, I do worry about the mobility of Russell Wilson and the pretty deep ball that he does throw, and the 50-50 receiver that he has in Courtland Sutton. So I'm not feeling confident that the Niners are going to shut down Denver in the way in which they did the first couple of weeks, but I am feeling very confident in this defense as a whole as we look over the course of the season. I think they're going to continue to have success.
Yeah, I think this defense is very solid. It's just this week is going to show us, can they, how much they've improved, because this is going to be the best quarterback they've faced at this point in the season. So we're going to get a better understanding of just how good this defense is, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this plays out.
As am I. We need that win because we talked about it. The narrative will get crazy no matter what. But if it's a loss, it gets crazier. Let's just be honest about it. A win at least settles down some reasonable Niner fans that are like, oh, we got a W. I don't have to be furious. And there'll be a whole subsect that, regardless of a W, will be furious. And I don't understand that, Jack. My life is too short not to be happy more often than being in a rage state. Let's talk about some key matchups that are going to be going down Sunday night. The first one is Denver's D-line coming up against the 49ers offensive line. I will admit, coming into the season, I thought it was very suspect of the 49ers in the interior. Didn't know what that was going to look like when they started playing for real. So far, it seems as if they are holding it down. I mean, when you go by PFF rankings, the interior of the offensive line is ranked higher than the tackles to this point. It's a fairly stout defensive line for the Denver Broncos. Bradley Chubb, Randy Gregory on the edges, going up against Trent Williams and Mike McGlinchey, the Jones brothers. Although I'm not sure if Draymond Jones is going to be out there. He is at least listed on the injury report. But DJ Jones, we know that man all too well. He's going to be out there, unfortunately, trying to stuff the run. He's the best D tackle in the league in ESPN's run stop win rate. I mean, that's why the man got $10 million per year from Denver. Who do you think has the advantage here? Is Denver going to be applying pressure to Jimmy G throughout, or is the 49ers offensive line going to be able to keep Jimmy's uniform fairly clean Sunday night?
They've done a really good job for the first couple of weeks. Denver has with getting to the quarterback. They have 10 hits and 5 sacks, and the two of those guys you mentioned have accounted for 3 of those sacks. So it's going to be, again, this is one of my keys for the game is how does Jimmy Garoppolo play? And part of that is can the offensive line keep him upright? Because we know that he's not going to run around the field and scramble and do all those kind of things. And he's going to have to be on point. He's going to have to make up for that, some of his lack of mobility with his arm and his quick release. And that's one of the things he's done so well. So it's going to be fun to watch.
Get the ball out quickly. That is something Jimmy is capable of doing, and you would think that would help to minimize that Denver defensive line. Also getting the run game going early, leaning in on Jeff Wilson Jr. Do you see this as another situation where Jeff Wilson Jr. is probably getting the bulk of the carries in this one, save for an injury situation, and that it's just a handful of carries being divvied out elsewhere? Or is it going to be a fairly even breakdown? I suppose in last game, when you look at the number of carries with TDP, it was a little closer to even than I would have guessed at the outset.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, primarily going to be Jeff Wilson Jr. You're going to, the Deebo Samuel one will be interesting to watch. He only had 4 carries last week. So some of that, I think, was because of how much the Seahawks were keen on him. The 49ers started using him as a decoy. So, it'll be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. But I would say it's probably going to be, in terms of carries, I'd say Wilson, and then whoever the backup is that they decide to use, and Deebo, those will be your top 3 ball carriers.
Yeah, that makes sense. Last week, you had Jeff Wilson Jr., 18 carries, Ty Davis-Price, 14. So as I meant there, a little bit closer than I would have expected. If I had been guessing, I probably would have put it somewhere closer to 20 and 10, 2-1, Jeff Wilson to Ty Davis-Price. But Ty Davis-Price racking up 14. To your point, Deebo Samuel did have those 4 carries in there. You know who else had 4 carries? Jimmy Garoppolo had 4 carries in that one. So, it's just racking up the rush yards. Kyle Shanahan running his quarterbacks like crazy.
He did. He ran him twice down on the red. I mean, almost twice in the same possession too.
It's wild. Right into Mike McGlinchey with the solid tackle on one of those, keeping his quarterback out of the end zone. Come on, Mike, you gotta jump back half a yard so he bumps into you at the goal line at least.
Solid tackle by Mike.
It was, unfortunately, a very solid tackle by Mike McGlinchey there at the goal line. Thankfully, we got in on the next play. Otherwise, we would have been watching that replay on Twitter all week and talking about it. Let's talk about another key matchup here in Jimmy G versus the linebackers. We did talk about that frequency with which Shanahan does attack the middle of the field. 49ers quarterbacks in general struggling with it, but Jimmy G gets labeled as absolutely throwing some of those bonehead picks. I have seen it myself and label him as such myself. Josie Jewell and Jonas Griffith have struggled a little bit in coverage, have struggled against tight ends. Jimmy sometimes struggles against linebackers. Where do you think the advantage is with Kittle returning from injury this week? Can Jimmy take advantage of a couple of less adept pass defense linebackers?
That's going to be a part of it, because that's, Jonas Griffith, wasn't he the one that was in 49ers camp last season that they
traded for a 6th round pick,
and played pretty well. So the 49ers are going to know a little bit about him. Again, I go back to this matchup. I think this matchup's going to be a lot closer than people want to make it out to be. I understand who these guys have played before, but this is a Sunday night game in Denver. Those aren't easy. And I think that Garoppolo is going to have to get the ball out quick, and those linebackers are going to be given some tight coverage. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays. I think it's going to be tough for him.
Very fascinating to watch. Kraftwerk Concrete saying second game, Jeff Wilson starting to look like old Jeff Wilson. Got to keep it up. I said this after last week that, hey, I had heard what you said about him in the preseason. Then I saw him in Chicago. I was like, well, Jack's just wrong about Jeff Wilson Jr. He didn't look so good. He comes back and no, it turns out, running on a small pond can slow you down a little bit. And so he does look a little bit like the Jeff Wilson of old. I'm excited to see him play again this week. Seems like he's running physically, running fast without hesitation, and running behind a line that, although a little bit better in pass protection, has been blocking well in the run game as well. Sean 9519ers wanting them to get credit says, can we give the credit so far to the O-line? I get that it's Seattle and Chicago, but I'm proud of these guys so far. Great sign. I will agree, because it was such a big question mark. The fact that it looks good, regardless of what the competition has been through 2 weeks, is a positive sign. And I expect things to continue along that positive vein, even if we get a little bit of a setback, because these are young gentlemen in particular at the guard spots.
Absolutely. Give him credit. I love Sean's. He's fired up. He's in the all caps. He's ready to go. He was yelling at me earlier because I screwed up, and he's right that I thought it was the rookie that had it, not DJ Dallas on the interception. But yeah, you've got to give that interior offensive line credit. This is a group that was throughout training camp and the offseason. What did you hear? This was a group that was going to be awful. The part of the reason a lot of people or some people were saying the Flyers were going to be an 8-9 win team was because of the interior of the offensive line. Those have all turned around. I wonder why. I mean, I've been telling you guys, have some faith in this group, because you put in a really good guy in Aaron Banks back where he played his entire college career. Probably going to work out for him when you put him back in the normal spot after having him try to play the other side. And then, I think they caught a break with Spencer Burford. He's been, just a revelation. There's a 5th round pick. I believe it's a 5th round pick, maybe 4th. Sean will yell at me if I'm wrong on that one, I hope. And, but Burford has been extremely solid. I've been so impressed with him since the first day I saw him on the field. So this is fun.
It is fun. Sean 9519ers comes back in to clarify. He says, Jack, you are great at what you do, buddy. Passion right. Indeed. A lot of passion from 49ers fans. George coming in to ask question, Rob, should I put Kittle in on my fantasy team? I'll let Jack tell you what he thinks. My answer is a resounding hell yes. I'll give away my teaser. I've got Kittle with 2 touchdowns in this one. 2 touchdowns for Kittle. So I'm starting him in every league that I can. I think it is go time for George Kittle. He's back out with Jimmy Garoppolo. They're buddies. Even though Jimmy won't call him back, he'll still throw a couple of touchdowns to him on the field. So yes, start Kittle. Jack, what do you think? I mean, my guess is you don't have anyone better on your roster to start than Kittle in fantasy, but do you believe Kittle will have a good fantasy game?
I'm awful at fantasy football. I'm awful. My one of my sons keeps asking me for advice. My sister keeps asking me for advice, and they keep losing games. So I would say listen to what Rob said. If Rob says to play George Kittle this week, play George Kittle, because Rob's a lot smarter when it comes to fantasy football than me.
That feels like next week they can blame Rob when George Kittle doesn't have his 2 touchdowns. That's what I see happening there. Silverado Kev in the chat. Silverado, we got to get you back on the program, says Rob Schuh. This year's D is nuts. Recipe for this game is same as for the season. We stay healthy on defense, and Jimmy doesn't keep teams in games. We win games and the Super Bowl. I'm loving the prediction. I'm loving the enthusiasm. I like the optimism. I feel very good about this roster as well. Man, we're going to get to it in just a little bit, but I feel something special about this team. Jack, do you think that there is a sense of destiny with this squad? Do you get a sense of anything special?
I think this is a really good team. It's a very good team that everybody, the experts that do this for a living, and myself included, and a number of other people were saying that this is a team that is built to go all the way to the Super Bowl. They have so much depth. They are so good. Some people were quite, the only thing that was kind of bringing people back was because of the quarterback. Well, now you got the guy that's taken them to a Super Bowl and an NFC Championship game back there. Kind of know what Jimmy Garoppolo is, but maybe he can be a little bit different this year. And, Kyle Shanahan, you got to do this. Tee the ball high and let it fly. That's all you got to do, my friend.
I love it. George says, don't worry, I'm not coming back in to blame you if Kittle doesn't get those touchdowns. George, that's very kind of you. I was kidding anyway. And if he doesn't, you should. You should give me flack for making that strong recommendation, the strong buy rating on George Kittle. All right, couple of last matchups, couple of quick topics, and we are getting out of here. So smash that like button, and remember that Jack's info is down below. Last couple ones, Deebo versus Patrick Surtain. Surtain is coming back from the shoulder injury. Deebo runs like a Mack truck. Does this give Deebo the advantage when he is Surtain, I should probably say, pronounce it correctly, when he's matched up against Patrick Surtain Jr.? Do you think he has the advantage being such a physical runner with someone dealing with a shoulder ailment?
Yeah, I think, but it's interesting when you look at it, because you don't really ever see Deebo Samuel matched up that often just with a single guy, because they're moving him around so much. You're going to see Deebo Samuel give those linebackers, like we talked about, fits and those kind of things. But yeah, if Surtain's out there dealing with the shoulder, get Deebo Samuel on that side, throw him a screen and make him come up and have to tackle him, because that would be a matchup that would favor the 49ers. I'm not even worried about a deep shot to Deebo in that situation. Give him the ball and let him run him over a couple times. That'll change the game.
It will. Randall Riley says Deebo going to help Surtain with that shoulder injury. Yeah, help him out a little bit. All right, Courtland Sutton coming up against Emmanuel Mosley and Mooney Ward. He's 6'4". He's got that, catch radius. He's great at the 50-50 balls. Wilson throws pretty deep passes. Is Courtland Sutton going to be a problem for the 49ers secondary on Sunday night?
think so. We saw what happened last week with DK Metcalf up against Emmanuel Mosley on that deep ball. Mosley couldn't play that any better, and Metcalf was still able to get up and get over the top of him. And now they're going to have a better quarterback that's making that throw. So that's going to be one to watch, is how they can handle him. I'm interested to see how Travarius Ward plays this week, because again, this is his first matchup against a really a better quarterback. So this is going to tell us a lot about this team.
Courtland Sutton, much like DK Metcalf, feels like the kind of wide receiver that you're not going to blank completely, that it's very rare where you're able to hold them without some type of a substantial catch. I would see the same. That probably Courtland Sutton is headed for 80 yards and a touchdown in this one. I still will get to the prediction, but I can spoil it by saying I'm picking the Niners to win in this one. I don't think that they'll be able to completely blank Courtland Sutton, but I feel as good about this cornerback duo as I have about any 49ers cornerback duo in recent memory. So if somebody's going to be able to hold Courtland Sutton, I think that Mooney and E-Man are up to the task. Now, look at this perfectly timed comment and the next topic. Jazz says, Rob, I'm getting 2019 vibes. He's getting 2019 vibes. And the next topic, back to the revenge tour, Jack. Are we reliving 2019 a little bit? I thought of this when I watched Jimmy with the last touchdown in the game on Seattle, and they panned into him. All the players have these shit-eating grins on their faces. Jimmy's smiling ear to ear. All the linemen are smacking him on the head and smiling ear to ear. Like, there is definitely a little bit of like, hey, the boys are back kind of energy to this squad. Do you get a sense of 2019 of feeling like, hey, one last ride with Jimmy, we are all in on this thing?
I really dislike the whole revenge tour narrative, or I don't like those things, because it seems like when you do those things, they don't ever pan out. Like,
they don't.
So I would scrap the revenge tour, and I would say, let's just go out and play 2022 and see if we can come out and be better. But this is a team that's not even the same team. It's a completely different team now. It's so far away from where they were in 2019 in terms of so many of these position groups. I know that some of the core guys are still there, but I think they have 12 out of the 22 or 12 out of the 23 starters are new. So this is a much different team. And from a revenge tour standpoint, get rid of that. This is the 2022 49ers with Samson Ebicom and, Javon Kinlaw and Brandon Ayuk and Jeff Wilson Jr., who was a running back there, but he wasn't the player that he is now. On the defensive side, Talanoa Hufaga's time to go out and make a play. Azeez Al-Shair's time to go make a play. This is a different team. So I have really good vibes, but let's grab revenge tour and let's make this team their own.
I'm with you, Jack. Get the revenge tour out of here. No more 2019 vibes. The 2022 team is better than the 2019 team. That doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to play out in the same way. This is the NFL. Anything can change week to week. But when I look at this roster and the way in which it's constructed, I believe 2022 stands on its own in that regard. Sean calling me out this time around saying, Rob Schuh, hey, bud, you're going against your prediction when you went over the schedule. You had a loss for Denver back in May. What changed, bud? I don't know. I don't know what changed. Maybe a certain switch and, early on in the season, I feel pretty confident, but I'm not getting into it. I'm going to get ruined if I give my actual reason there. Game prediction, Jack. Let's get into that. Let's finish this off.
I want to hear it now. I want to hear your reason for your switch, because you kind of opened the gates right there. I will
say, so I fundamentally believed in the decision that was made to go over to Trey Lance. And I thought it was a better idea to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo, because I thought there was going to be some ups and downs. And with those downs, if they happened early in the season, there would be a whole kerfluffle about trying to bring Jimmy Garoppolo in. So I was prepared to go through some struggles with Trey Lance. I will say, early in the season, I do feel like some of these games are more winnable with Jimmy Garoppolo. In saying that, I still was on board with starting Trey because I believed in his maturation process. I believed he would get better over the course of the season, and that those games still remained winnable even with his ups and downs. Towards the end of the year, we would be a more dangerous team with Trey Lance in there. But I will say, earlier on in the season, with Jimmy and his familiarity in this offense, I think it gives us a slight edge that we didn't have with Trey learning and picking things up as he went.
I think that's a really good reason for, if I didn't look at it that way, but I can understand where somebody who's a little bit, and I was a little bit nervous with Trey Lance as well, what he's going to do. I just felt like the team itself was good enough to kind of carry them through those early periods. That's one reason why I had them winning this game originally, was just because of the team itself. But I can understand making that based on this really being the first big road game too, national TV on Sunday Night Football. Mile High, Denver is tough on Sunday night in primetime games. So I can understand why you would have gone that direction, and I can understand why you switched, because I kind of feel the same way.
I do. I feel good about my prediction of the 49ers winning this one. Daniel Jr. Middleton predicting 24-14 Niners. John B says, Rob, San Francisco 31, Denver 17, but the last 7 Denver points come in the final 2 minutes for a moral victory. 31-10 is going to feel good, John B, if that is the case. All right, Jack, what is your prediction for the outcome of this one, San Francisco against Denver Sunday night?
Man, I've come so close to putting this one going the Broncos away. I just have, but I just can't do it, because I think that, again, the 49ers, the same reason why I kept going with them winning this one originally with Trey Lance, is the 49ers roster is fundamentally better than the Broncos. So I'm going with the 49ers winning this thing 23-20. It's going to be a tight one. It's not going to be a big victory, but I think the over-under is 44, so I would take the under, and I would take the I think 2.5, I think, is the points right now. Not that I'm a betting guy, but I would go with the 49ers if it's 2.5.
Jack, why? Craftwork Concrete says he's very distraught by this close prediction that you have. He's gonna have a heart attack. I'm gonna have a heart attack if it breaks down to a 3-point game. But Jan coming in to agree, 24-21 Niners, very close to your own prediction. As Sean makes his prediction, he says, you've switched because you're going to the game. No way you'd be flying to Denver predicting a loss. No chance. I like that. That is fair. I probably would have switched it. Jaguayo 56 coming in, sneakerhead here on the channel. He says 30-plus runs for the Niners, and Hufanga with 2 picks, 3 sacks is a win. Go Niners. Appreciate that. Darren with the conservative prediction. 70-3 Niners. Going to be a close one. Going to be one where, it gets a little out of hand. Kurt Papatakis coming in 25-23 Niners, a 2-point game, running turnovers, a fourth quarter comeback, but missed the 2-pointer to force overtime. Man, that will be a nail biter. I've got this one close throughout the game, but at the end, racking up an extra touchdown that makes it look in the final standings as if it is not. I've got the 49ers winning this 31-17. I'm going one step further with my big, bold predictions. 2 Kittle touchdowns. Called that one earlier. I'm calling the rest of them too. 1 for Jeff Wilson Jr. and 1 for Deebo. There are your 4 touchdowns. Robbie Gould with the field goal in there to make it 31-17. I'm very excited. Very excited for this one. I'm excited to go out to Denver. I head out there tomorrow. I will be doing a program from the parking lot Sunday in the afternoon, and then a post game from the hotel. Very excited about the Denver trip, and then very excited to come on with you on your channel Monday to break down, hopefully, a 49ers victory, Jack.
I'm looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun. I hope you have a great time out in Denver. I know that I'm having some FOMO out here.
Well, thank you very much. I most definitely will attempt to have a great time. Angel with the prediction, Broncos 44, 49ers 6. I'm going to make a prediction that Angel is not a 49ers fan. That's my prediction on that prediction. Lawless Light with the super chat coming in. If Jimmy G, no blowouts, like when we do that, it's Jimmy G, no blowouts. Like when we do that, 24-17. I'll take a 24-17 victory in that one. It would be fantastic. Papa Phil says, enjoy yourself. I will. Thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the comments. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel on your way out. Remember, you can follow Jack on Twitter. You can subscribe to him on YouTube, and you can bookmark that Press Democrat page. All those links are down below in the description of the video. As always, Jack, pleasure having you on. I look forward to seeing you again on your channel on Monday, sir.
Looking forward to it. Can't wait. Have a good time out in Denver. Everybody, thanks for joining. Make sure you like and subscribe this thing for Rob, because he's the man.
Yes, indeed. On the way out, Raphael562 always says, great show, gentlemen. Niners 23-16. Lawless Light dropping the knowledge. Jack, you the man. I couldn't agree more. We will be back with Jack on his channel Monday. Until then, Cheers, faithful.